you so much. Thank you for that so much. And thank you for being here. And thank you for being here. I'm so honored that you're here.
This means so much to me because I saw the movie like you guys when it came out, and I was shooting an action film at the time, and I've weirdly done mostly action films for the majority of my career, even though I don't look like it. And there was this scene. I was feeling emotional throughout the film, and when this scene happened, I was just tears were pouring down my face, and I was like, they're letting her be so powerful. Because it's you know, it's time, right? It's time. So thank you so much. And I went into work the next day and I was like, you know that thing that you just gave to the guy to do? I'm doing it. Good. Yeah. That's awesome. Really cool. Okay, so I'm gonna ask Patty some questions, yeah? Cool. All right. So forgive me for looking at my phone. I put all the notes there. Look, I have Patty with big exclamation points written at the top. Okay, so here's a question. When was the first time in your life that you can remember realizing that directing was an actual job, like something that people could do for their career?
You know, it was a weird journey, because when I go back and I tell the story of, like, I have a friend who's a singer, and he tells a story of, like, remembering, imagining himself as a kid standing in all the lights. And I'm like, wow, mine is very odd still to this day, because it's always, I loved all the other artists, and I had very specific plans for what I thought they should do, like, but I didn't want to do it. And I didn't. And even though I watched tons of films and I'd lived, you know, around the world and was pretty exposed to all different kinds of films, there's something about when you don't live in Hollywood, which I never had. It never occurred to me that that was even a possible, accessible job. So I went to school for painting because I was like, I guess I'm an artist, and I guess, am I a fine artist or a commercial artist? I guess I'm a fine artist. So then I go to school for painting, but then meanwhile, my first love was really music, but I didn't want to play it. And it's an interesting moment. It was when Peter Gabriel wrote the score to Birdie, and I couldn't stop listening to it over and over again. And then I took an experimental film course. And the second I finally put picture to music and started filming my friends and put it to music, I was like, that's it. So it actually was never that I wanted to be a director. It was that I discovered finally that you could make films. You know, and I was like, oh, that's what I want to make. I want to make things that make me feel like those movies have made me feel. And this is the most complex art form to do it in, and I love it. And so it was like an interesting, weird way.
Yeah, that's incredible. So how did you start making movies? Like when did that all start happening for you?
So it started, interestingly, my first instinct as someone who had trained in, I had always taken, since I was in junior high, photography and painting and screen printing and all kinds of things. But as soon as I had realized I wanted to make films, I was like, oh, okay, obviously then I learned the trade. So I found a commercial production company that did amazing things, and I was like, I should go intern. I went and I interned there, and then got onto a set and knew a guy who was the loader on the set, an American Express commercial, and I was 20. And he was like, well, you could work for free. These guys might train you if you work for free. So I was like, great, that's what I want to do, camera, I'll learn that. And so I worked for free for 4 or 5 months, and then I became a second AC, and then I became a focus puller, and I did that for 10 years. I was a camera person. And so I initially got into it because I was like, I'll do this on the side, only commercials and music videos. So I was like, great, you're working, and then I'll write and direct my own films on the side. Of course, you become a working professional, and that doesn't happen. And so then I did that for 10 years, frustrating at the time. But then 10 years later, I was actually, I'll never forget, I was doing a Michael Jackson video, which is an amazing other story, but I was on a Michael Jackson video, and I met the DP, and the DP said, there's a school called AFI where you can get in as a professional, and you don't have to, because now I've been working for 10 years, and I'm a union camera person. I don't want to go learn, boom, I just want to make films. And so he said you could get in as just a director if you get in. So I set my sights on that, came here, made a superhero short film that got into this festival. And while I was at this festival, they had a program called the Kodak Connect program, where I met someone named Brad Wyman, who who happened to be making these serial killer films, and said, well, I'm doing this, blah, 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 and I'm trying to get out of the industry, and the whole thing was really hilarious. And I said, oh, I watch true crime all the time, and I was like, oh, you should actually do a movie about Eileen Wuornos. And he said, you should, like, you might be able to get that made. And so I started to work on that, and initially met some odd people who were making those movies, and ended up walking away from that and really finding my own love of this movie. And I was like, I think this could be more than what it is. And then Brad Wyman was lucky enough to introduce me to Donald Kushner, who is here tonight, my great producer, there he is, who Donald and Brad believed in the movie and made it, and said, we believe you could direct it and we'll back you doing it. And I made Monster, and that's how I got to be a director. Thanks to Donald.
Incredible. So when did you, was there a point when you felt really confident calling yourself a director? Or like, was there a defining moment where you're like, yeah, I'm a director?
Yeah, you know what? That was. Monster was, and it happened in the weirdest possible way. First of all, as a camera person doing commercials and music videos, you work with so many hundreds, many very undeserving directors, right. You know, many, all the time. And also, you know, like, I've come up in kind of, my family was in the military. I've seen this enough that I don't think it's not a prize to be the director. It's just the job that you're the one that got assigned to that job. You're the one that does it. So first of all, I wasn't ever thinking about deserve or not deserve. I'm like, you either get the job or you don't get the job. And if you get the job, you better do the job, you know? And when it came to Monster, I had been corresponding with Eileen Wuornos, and she ended up, you know, she was who she was, and she was a very damaged, sad, tragic person, but she ended up being executed right before we shot the film, and left all of her personal letters as a big surprise to me. And so actually I walked onto the set of Monster. It never occurred to me that I wasn't the right person for the job, for other reasons. I was like, at this point, nobody is ever coming near this movie. I have been left with such a duty of being the only person who understands and has taken on this responsibility. And so it was actually wonderful, because I think if I had been hired by a studio to do something else, I might have found myself in that headspace of like, did they pick the right person or whatever? But I blissfully walked into it feeling literally like, I am, good or bad, I am directing this, and so this has to be done very carefully, and it got me right over that. But honestly, I think that's what directing should always be. It's a job that needs to be taken very seriously and treated very professionally, and it's a duty more than it is like some sort of grand title. So anybody can do that job, but you better do that job. You know what I mean? So anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what was so interesting hearing how you answer that question is that it almost seems to me that as a director you better feel like you're probably like the only custodian of that story when you're starting out. And so how did you get to that place of ownership with Wonder Woman, you know?
Because I also felt like I was a perfectly right director for it. I would not always feel that way, but I always loved the genre, and I always loved Wonder Woman, and I always had a very specific passion for what I believed that kind of movie could be. And so there were many other people who could have made a wonderful movie out of Wonder Woman, but I was one of the people who felt particularly suited to an interest in the genre. You know, like, it wasn't new to me. I wasn't trying on something. It was something I thought about a lot. And so that's the best you can be, is someone who loves it and is passionate about it and is willing to dedicate yourself to it. And so that I think is so important, picking the right projects, you know, picking something that you really believe you can deliver what they need and what you can make what you think is a beautiful film out of, you know, and sometimes you do jobs for other reasons, but that was how there.
Yeah, that's a question that I wanted to ask you, because there's sort of like, there's this constant tension between the idea of work begets work. Mm-hmm. So, you know, like you don't be precious about it. Like you gotta work if you're a creative person, you want to make a living. But also the work that you do defines you. And so how do you kind of navigate that at every stage of your career? I mean, it's for me personally, I have kind of like an interesting sort of like insight into this, because my dad, it's like if he's unemployed for a month, like it's like no movie ever happened in his life. Like he needs a constant thing, whether or not, like he looks at his career like a season of television. Like there's going to be a couple of terrible episodes, and there's going to be a couple of amazing episodes, and there's going to be some mediocre ones, and and some ones that really grab people unexpectedly. Like that's how he looks at it. Yeah. But it is sometimes I'm like, you should just wait for the right one. Like you knew there were problems, but he needs to keep working like that because he feels like work begets work, and that's what his kind of mission is. But then there is that balance, and I think that you've definitely had. I mean, I observed that you've had a journey with that, because it does feel that the projects that you've done are so suited for you.
Thank you. It's funny. I'm always endlessly fascinated by that. I'm endlessly because I have a lot of friends in all camps, and they all make potentially great films. Like it doesn't mean that one thing leads to the right answer and one doesn't. For me, I always sort of say this to everybody who wants to be a director. I'm like, you always have to think for yourself about what you want out of this industry in general. It can go a lot of ways. Like success means a million doors open, and you have to pick which door you want to walk through, and any of them are the right choice if it's the right choice for you. For me, I think that I want, like, I have a singular goal. I want to make a masterpiece of a most beautiful emotional film in my lifetime, right? And so everything I do, if it's taking me a step closer to that, is good. That's fine. If I'm going to learn something, or if I'm going to whatever it is. If I know that I'm not going to learn anything, and in fact I'm going to train myself to be false, then I'm not taking a step forward, right? So and then I have a secondary really simple rule, which is movies are too long for me, myself, to do for any other reason than passion. But I've loved the TV I've done too, but I'm like, I love to work. But if I'm gonna just try on a new tool and try different things, I would rather do that in TV. Because then I can be like, oh, that's cool, and I try that on, and let me try this. But if I'm gonna work on something every day for 3 years, I need to have a deep personal relationship with it. That's me. And so that was how I kind of look at things that way. I said to myself a long time ago, don't go to movies. It was why I started working in television, is I was like, ooh, that was an interesting experience. I don't wanna look to movies for money. I wanna have a job so that I don't have to make a movie I don't wanna make, and I can direct television, direct pilots, and whatever. But yet I can see now that I'm sort of, on a little bit of a roll, I can also see, like, it's after making Wonder Woman, like I can't remember not making Wonder Woman. And so now, the second it was over, I was like, what do you mean? What? Hey guys, like what, So it's like, I can see how I may end up changing and becoming somebody that works nonstop too. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's like, there's that momentum as well, right? Like okay, so here's a question. How is the momentum feeling different after Monster and after Wonder Woman? Like what's kind of the, obviously, like one of them is this was like just a shocking kind of global sensation that, this happens every once in a while, meaning like a century, like twice a century. But it's but the fact that Monster was in its own way a version of this, it was like, I mean, I can say many, many, many remarkable things about that movie, and you, like, I remember seeing you like at the Oscars. Did you have blue hair?
Not at the Oscars. I have in my past. But
I remember seeing an image of you with blue hair or something. But what was that? How has it felt different? It's over 10 years apart. Like what's been, because they're both huge kind of breaks and turning points for a director.
Yeah, it's so hard for me to tell between two things, because there's me and how much I've grown up and changed, and then there's the industry. Mm-hmm. And it's very hard to know which is which. Certainly, I was I thought I was prepared when Monster came out, and even at the time, I was like, hey, I'm a jaded enough person that I was kind of like, I had seen other even friends of mine go up and go down. And so I wasn't like a babe in the woods, like, oh my God. I was sort of like, oh, it won't last, it won't last, it won't last, you know? So I was sort of very aware of what was happening, but at the same time, I didn't know how to take advantage of it in the way that I would now, you know? And so, and also the whole thing happened so quickly. Like literally we finished the movie and boom, then it was in theaters and boom, then she won an Oscar. And it was like, within weeks of all of these different things.
I remember that.
Yeah,
That's what I remember. It was like a phenomenon. Quick. It was incredible.
So I was exhausted, and so right in the wake of it all, I was also just kind of reeling and trying to take it all in. I think the difference now is I'm so grateful for the years in between because I was able to try so many different things and learn so many different things, and then having my son kept me from doing another feature for a little while, so I learned even more. So I was like, I'll try that pilot, try this pilot, try that. And so now I feel much more like I understand what I want out of my career. It's much easier for me to know I don't want to do this. Yes, I would do that. Here's how I could handle that. All of those things. But also the industry has luckily changed too, because I do think that at the time of Monster, it was the market for who was interested in what I wanted to do was very specific and a lot smaller. So there were people wanting me to do what they wanted to do that was not something right for me. You know, every once in a while there was. Whereas now I sort of feel that those things could be changing in the climate right now of like really truly being interested in what different kinds of people want to make and see.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I want to ask a little bit about like your process when you are getting prepared to shoot and direct. And I guess let me use Wonder Woman as an example. What are some of the kind of like the thematic things as a filmmaker that you identified that became organizing principles early on for how you wanted to kind of shoot and capture this movie? So like, let me give like a lame example. So for, I mean, I guess this isn't lame, but it's for Mission Impossible. Right. The way they shoot it, the audience can never be ahead of Tom Cruise, of Ethan Hunt. You can never see reveal something and then show Tom discovering it. Like he needs to be ahead of the audience. And that's kind of something that affects the whole movie. What are some things kind of within that world that we wouldn't know about, but we would feel?
I have a million of them because I am a big system person.
Yes,
and
right.
I get extremely organized. And I only find that it triggers and holds creativity better if you make very clear rules about what is this, what is it thematically about, what therefore is the genre and style that we want to execute it with. Therefore, what are the rules of that? And then it goes straight down the rabbit hole of like, there are so many little tiny nuances of like what colors we would use and what color palette and how we did things and whatever. I'm a total believer in that, and I find it very helpful to everybody when that is figured out together and alone and whatever. And so in this case, in Wonder Woman, to me the movie was about a limited period of time that this superhero became Wonder Woman, and it was through her eyes. So the journey is through Diana's eyes. You are in Diana's shoes, and Diana is therefore our universal human character. So it meant that I never wanted to experience her from the outside or have her become the unrelatable character. Her journey is our journey. Now, inherently, Steve's journey is our journey too, because he literally is us. Like, he is mankind, and we are not gods. But so I wanted to make that was something I wanted to do. And then the theme that I thought was very important was that there was no bad guy ultimately at the end. You know, that like this is a superhero who's a god, who comes into our world and comes to kill the bad guy and save the world. And then it turns out there was no bad guy, it's us. And that we're never gonna stop and we're gonna keep doing it. And yet she has to make a choice. Ares has learned the exact same thing, and he made the choice to destroy mankind because they're so flawed. So she has to take that in completely and then decide, no, I'm not going to destroy mankind. I choose that I believe in love, which is very core to Wonder Woman. And I loved the idea of that superhero, where you're sort of like, come in here, it's a superhero, it's a normal superhero. And then it's a superhero who, it's an intellectual superhero. You know, ultimately she makes a choice to save the world in this different way. So thematically, that was the story I was telling. And then I was like, and then I wanted to make a grand classic tentpole, like of yesteryear, that was like for everyone, that made me laugh, that made me cry, that had a great love story, that was paced a little more slowly, that all of those things. I just was so influenced by Superman and wanted it really. I felt like Wonder Woman deserved that kind of film and was the right kind of Wonder Woman, right kind of character to hold it, where I was like, to really get to experience this classic film through a character who's not, she's not all to anything. She's like she's not darker or harder or any, she's just straightforward superhero. So all of those things then dictated, oh, we use wide lens, we don't use tights, we don't blah, 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 blah. A million little things about how we shot it, what the color palette was, what the experience was, where your point of view is, where your camera is. You never get to a place where you're watching, except for when you want to, in No Man's Land. Everywhere else in the movie, we're never watching her be a badass from afar. We are her. And that was also a very fun place to take it from, because then you're experiencing the action from her point of view. You know, many people have done it, but that was people don't do it with female characters as often, and that was a great fun thing to do.
And I think that's probably why it felt so kind of viscerally emotional for the audience, because they were in her POV and experiencing, feeling empowered in that way.
Yeah. And it is interesting. It's been interesting when you look back. I'm certainly not the first, but there aren't a lot of, there end up being, and it's probably because it is point of view. It is like your point of view that you easily slip into. It was surprising then to realize there haven't been that many female characters who get to be the everything. So they get to be super, super tough, but they also get to be weak and have a love story and all of those things. And so it was really great to get to take that ride.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And when do you figure all this out? Like, is it fully formed by the time you're pitching it? Is it something that is getting figured out in pre-production and conversations with your DP and like during the script process? I mean, that's kind of like a vague question, but just your point of view as a filmmaker, how sturdy is that, you know, at each phase? And when do you feel like, okay, I understand what I'm doing? I'm fairly ahead of it. So before I even pitch it, I will have figured out a lot of things. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't continue to change. And it doesn't mean there aren't rules that you don't figure out right up until the very end. Because I think it's constantly evolving and you're never positive that it's working. You know, so it is always changing, and every new department that comes is a new experience of the broader vision. So you're having to make all new rules for that, and they're having to make up their own rules or you know, design new cool things. So, but that's just me. I know a lot of great filmmakers, really truly great filmmakers, who are much more experiential and in fact believe in not figuring things out so much, so that they're much more alive in the moment. It depends what works for you. Like I feel like there are so many different systems of filmmaking, and I am endlessly fascinated by the directors who like just how other directors work, and then I'll look at their work and I'll be, I don't get it. I don't get how you feel comfortable being so out there like that. Like I would not be. I plan and I think and I calculate, and then I'm very free in the moment. That's what works for me. Yeah, I personally definitely relate to that. And whenever I'm working with a director who's like, oh, what should we shoot today? I'm just like,
I would have a heart attack. I mean, I just want to break out in a sweat even thinking about that. Like, oh.
Oh man, yeah, no, that happens. That happens. So who have kind of been your teachers? Like, who are the people that like, you know, active sort of like mentors in your life, or people you go to ask the difficult questions when you're sort of like, I'm figuring this out? Who are those people in your life?
Oh my God, I have such strange ones. I really do. I wish that I had like a simple answer for that. There have been all kinds of different filmmakers along the road who have been really helpful friends and like taught me a lot, you know? I mean, there's been great conversations with like Gary Ross when I went through the award season. Gary ended up being somebody who was like, he could tell me all kinds of things about filmmaking. I've heard great things from Catherine Bigelow in talking to her. You know, interestingly, and it's a strange one, but it's true, but Steve Perry, the singer who had written a song that I put in Journey, he ended up joining the movie and helping me finish the film. And it's interesting that he's a musician and I'm a filmmaker, but his complex thoughts about art end up having a lot in common. So I end up talking to him a lot, and a lot of composers. I talk to a lot of musicians about process more than anybody, which is very strange. But for some reason, my mind is very musical. And so like how they organize music and how they organize rhythm and all of those things makes perfect sense to me. And we end up talking in a very similar way. And then, you know, so all different kinds of people, all different kinds of people.
So in terms of rhythm, in terms of pace, how does that kind of play into your organization of how you plan out your scenes? I mean, that's
a lot. Because here's the thing about music. It's funny how people talk about music and they talk about it and there are all of these interesting things about math and music. Whereas, you know, endlessly mathematicians have studied why is music proving mathematical theory. But it's true, it is. And jazz, and there are great jazz music, you know, Coltrane, like ended up, like this is singularly what he was working on in his career. It was like how math was being reflected back in jazz. And it doesn't mean that any of it's not emotional or beautiful, but there are certain structures of the world and universal truths that are universal, and they're fascinating. And so there are phenomenons and experiences that one has watched the building of and the rhythm of in music super clearly. It also is the same in drama, and it works the same in theater, and many different places. But in music, it's very simple, like how it works. You start it out, and what is it you're saying, and what are you leading people to believe, and then where does it build, and then what, is it a surprise, or is it inevitable, and then how does that rhythm go down? All of those things are filmmaking exactly, you know, and so the rhythm is huge. And so I notice it like that you, the director, are the only one holding the rhythm of the concerto of this entire musical piece in your head. And other people will join you on it, and your composer will certainly join you, and everybody joins you in a way. But it's like that to me is like, you know, I have to be hearing the metronome. And sometimes it means you're doing interesting things. You're like holding actors back. Nope, not yet, you know, not yet. And now, you know, because you're trying to hold the rhythm of something, and if it goes bang, 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 it's not gonna work. You'll fatigue people in 2 hours, and it didn't build anywhere, and all that stuff. And so, yeah, I love, the structure. I've never talked about this before. That's very funny. Not like
I'm
this.
Obsessed with all of this.
It's great.
So exciting. So how do you work with actors? Is there, like, do you find that it's really valuable to have a rehearsal process with them? Like, are you sparse with your direction, heavy-handed with your direction, somewhere in between? Like, I'm
extremely involved. Extremely. Because I fucking love it. And I love actors, truly. And if somebody really needs me to be sparse, I'll be sparse, but not even really. Like, I really won't. I really won't. That's not even true. But I am so involved and delighted by that process, for real. Like, that's it. This is everything now, right? So everything, like, if I wasn't a director, I would be a psychologist. I am so interested in what makes people tick. And so it makes it a very, like, enjoyable relationship on many levels, because I'm genuinely interested in, wow, that's interesting. I didn't think that would go that okay, and then I'm talking to the actor. That's funny. Why do you think? Okay, let's try this other thing and see how that works, you know? So that dialogue about like, wow, that's funny. I didn't think that resistance would result in feeling like that. Let's try no resistance or whatever it is, you know? But so first of all, casting is massive. So I'm working with actors that I believe in and love anyway. But then going on that journey with them, like, because I'm a writer, I have gone on that journey before most of the time. And so I'm incredibly interested. I sat in a room trying to figure out what I was gonna do as them too, you know? And so it's like, so I am super interested in it, and then watching them perform and watching them do incredible things and watching like that whole thing, I love it so much that I end up very, very, very interested and very, I think being present is very important. And that's another thing where I'm like, sometimes I see directors who barely talk to actors and they give good performances, and I'm like, I don't get it. Not that I'm not doing the performance, but I can't imagine not being incredibly in deep conversation with those actors about what's going on. You know, whatever is good for them, but also for the performance. So sometimes they might not be what they want to do, but I've never had them not be happy afterwards. They might have resistance about doing it a certain way, and I might have to really push. But if it gets to something great, then they're happy, you know? So anyway, it's my favorite part.
How do you navigate conflict on a set? And just because I was thinking, like, in the moment when you're sort of like not negotiating, but like emotionally negotiating with an actor, and you're needing to push them in a place where they may not have instincts to go or something. What's your language to make them trust you? Like, what in a moment of tension or conflict?
The key that I have had to that is that first of all, I very much care in being truthful and doing honest work. And so I'm not ever interested in trying to push them into doing something that they genuinely have a problem with. Not that. It's not that I do to people. Like, if they're like, this is not the character, I never do that. But and this happens often, like if there's, we got it, and no, we didn't get it yet, and it's gonna be harder than that, and we're gonna have to go a lot harder than that, then I honestly, because I have this as a director with many different departments, where it's like, I'm responsible for delivering, I'm the one who promised to deliver this well, and to make the film that you signed on to do. So I actually almost feel like parental about it, where I'm sort of, it's almost, and sometimes and that sounds condescending, but I don't mean it this way. It's almost like making your kid do something that they don't want to do. As long as you know it's for both of your best, and you truly are soul searching to make sure that it's the right thing to do, then it's the right thing to do. And then I don't feel bad. Even if I feel bad at the moment, I'm like, I know, man, I know you don't want to do this again, but I'm telling you, I think that there's further to go. I really do. Let's just try. And, you know, and so it's like, you know, that's how I go into it, is like, or let's try another thing. And if you're right, and it turns out that I won't use it, like, well, let's just try this other thing. Let's just try. Let's push for this other thing, or whatever it is. But I believe in that. I believe, like, you're letting them down too, if you're not telling them the truth about what you're seeing. If you're the director, if you know it's not going to cut into what you both want, then you need to make them give that, you know? And it's not like you're driving them relentlessly all the time, but it's like but it will ultimately add up to what the performance you both want it to be, then it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like remembering your job, essentially. Yeah. And there's a phrase that a makeup artist taught me once that I use all the time when I'm feeling like, oh gosh, there's going to be some conflict, and I just have to not be a people pleaser right now. And I always say to myself, I'm like, my loyalty is to the screen. My loyalty is to the screen.
I agree, yeah. But that's the truth, and that is the truth, and that is a very organizing principle. And even like you're talking about conflict, like when I've had to fire people too, it makes it easier, because I'll try other things first to try to make it a successful relationship. But then if it's now detracting from all these other people's work, then I have to do something. and fire that person, because everybody else here is working and it's working out right, and for whatever reason this thing is not working. So I owe it to the movie to address it, you know? And so it's like, it doesn't make any of it easy, but definitely it's what organizes it.
In terms of leadership, because directing is so much about leadership, what do you have kind of a philosophy around that? Is there an approach? Like, do you think about that? Because it is, I mean, you mentioned having family in the military, and it is really a military structure on set. And so what's your relationship to that?
I think about it constantly, and I am as interested in it as I am in people, because now it's people in in a larger organism, which is also fascinating. So watching group dynamics and power dynamics is also fascinating. So again, not unlike being a director, having grown up, my father was a fighter pilot and all my uncles were fighter pilots, and we moved from base to base, and they have different commanders. And sometimes so-and-so's the squadron leader and sometimes so-and-so's not. So I think even watching that kind of structure change gave me that belief system of like, oh, it's not because Jerry is the greatest or my dad's the greatest or whatever. It's because that's his job today. So everybody's listening to that person today, because otherwise what would happen, you know? All hell would break loose. So that person has to be the leader, and they have to do it, and they have to, you know. So that's very much my belief system about directing. I think like you owe it to everybody to have a possible plan that you think is going to work, and then to be the one who is responsibly moving you towards that plan. And even as dry as that sounds, within that there's a huge amount of artistry, because in my case, I've matched up my passion with a plan of like, I think this is a movie that could you know, make me feel all of these incredible things, but also I think that Wonder Woman could be a successful movie, and whatever it is, you're matching up different things. But in order to make the artistic movie that I want to make, I have to have all these people help me. And so you have to be a responsible leader to those people, which means you have to do your work, and then you have to lead in a confident way, and in a fair way, and in a, you know, but in a precise way, and all those things. So it's like, I don't think that I walk around thinking about it, and I actually never walk around and I'm like, self-conscious about, am I appearing like a leader? No, it's much more internal than that. It's much more, oh, I do know what I'm asking them to do today, and I do think it's a fair thing to ask them to do, and I won't, you know, be doing the same thing tomorrow, and whatever it is. And so just so that when people are saying to you what's going on, you could say A's going on, B's going on, C's going on, C's not going to last for very long, and then D is going to, you know, whatever. It's like, and so I think that stuff is really important, because it's work, you know, it's people going to work every day and they want to know what they're doing. And I've seen the chaos ensue when there's a lack of clarity and information. It's just much easier if you can convey that and people, you know. But anyway, yeah, I'm endlessly fascinated in watching how those dynamics go.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned how just with Wonder Woman there is that balance of the artistry of the film and the kind of the like the IP and the inherent interest in that, and sort of like protecting that. And so how do you it's like you've made two completely different kinds of movies, because there's like the indie film, which is like the, you know, passion project and all of that, and then and that's one, it's perceived as being one kind of thing, and then a movie like Wonder Woman. Like, how do you navigate? I mean, because we're really living in a time where there is a shift where the IP is more valuable than the artistic, you know, singular artistic sensibility. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of times on a set, sometimes it's like, well, that's what they want to do, and you know it's wrong. But with films like this, the stakes are so high, and so there are a lot of people involved, and there's a lot of sort of like, no, it's got to be like this, or it's got to look like that, and so, and you're feeding into toys and ancillary markets, and how involved are you in all of that stuff?
Extremely involved, yeah. And it's fascinating because I'm still approving products today. Like you're still oh, this is Target is going to put this up. I don't think that that's our color palette, and you know, whatever. It's like it still goes on. It's amazing. Yeah. But listen, it's funny because I think it's gotten very sad for a while. Like when I made Monster, one of the big changes was there was an indie film market. And then it went through this period. Then I got pregnant, and when I came out of it, I was like, great, I'll take that little break. When I came out of it, indie films had died. There was only IP and only tent poles, and that was it. And that's super sad, and obviously wasn't going to last because it's just not the world. You know, like there's so many great stories to be told. So I think that they're both like, you know, it's funny, this movie has made me talk about this a lot. I don't think that there's any genre that can't be truly great. And I think that the films that I grew up watching in the 70s showed me that many times. There were great horror movies. There were great thrillers. There were great blockbusters. There was great superhero movies. And so, like, I believe in the history of story for thousands of years has meant that the public theater can make beautiful things. You know, the peasants can watch, you know, like they can listen to Nessun Dorma and hear like an opera for the masses can turn out to be a complete masterpiece. And so I think it's a shame that more people don't, in the studio system, sometimes work a little harder to aspire to that. I think it's sad when there's a jaded attitude of, this is just a blah, blah. I'm like, Jesus, why go into anything like that when you can make great? Like, you could try to make great, or you could at least try, you know? And so I think that there's no genre I would say couldn't be a film that I could aspire to do great in. In both the case of Wonder Woman and Monster, they happen to fall into something that earned their keep. So it's like Monster these serial killer movies were being made and they were making money. Oh, okay, well, for that much money, and I can make something that I truly believe in and make this character film, awesome, because it will fit both bills and it will earn its keep. Wonder Woman, I feel the same way. It's the rare thing where it was so clean that I could really aspire to do what I wanted with it. But at the same time, even I saw that what I wanted to do, I felt was a perfectly right thing to do financially for the success of the movie as well. You know, I've met on many things that I did not feel that way about, where I was like, the math here, like you're saying about your dad, like that you knew that I had problems. Like, I have met on those and been like, this isn't going to work out. Like, I can tell you right now, it's not going to work out. So it doesn't, it's like, I just believe in like whatever the formula that adds up to, oh, I can aim for great and you get what you want to for the money, great. That's for me. You know, like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah, and that's the High Wire Act, for sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, genre. I'm so curious. What are the genres that you feel most drawn towards? Like, I couldn't do like a slasher film or something like that. Like, I'd be like, I'm wrong for that. So what's the stuff you like?
Well, it's funny. I have a very funny relationship to both comedy and horror, because they are kind of what I watched the most growing up. Like, I obsessively watched horror movies and comedy, and obscure comedy. And so I don't know what it is that's not either of the things that I went into, but I think it could, both of those could be the right thing. But I also couldn't, now that I'm an adult, I couldn't personally do something that was gratuitous or like violence for violence sakes. Yet, if I could do The Shining, or I could do The Omen, or I could do one of those films, definitely. You know, like where you're like, wow, that's a great movie, but the scares and the tension and all of that stuff. And likewise with comedy, I'm like, I couldn't just do any comedy, but I can't wait to do a comedy. The funny thing is, like, I feel like I came up the most around comedy, and I haven't really gotten to do much comedy until Wonder Woman, and I loved it. Like, I just loved getting to laugh on set, and, you know, and watch these guys crack me up and have a great time. So, yeah, I feel like I couldn't do a slasher movie either, but I could do horror. I love a thriller. I love, all kinds of things.
What's ahead in terms of like the kinds of things that you want to explore? And I mean, is there something? I guess there's you can answer that from a creative perspective, but you could also answer it from like in terms of emerging technology and the digital revolution, and like what, as a filmmaker on both sides, what are the territories that you're excited to explore in your future?
I'm not all that thoughtful so far about alternate experiences. I feel like it's going to be further down the road before I'm like virtual reality filmmaking. Like, I think it's interesting, but for now, and the reason is this, I think for now, the history of story that you take in, it's interesting. I find being immersed in the story extremely distracting. I'm like, that's not what anybody's ever wanted. Thousands of years we've had the stage and people don't want to get up on it with you. They want to watch it, you know? And that's like, and I constantly, every time I sit in the theater and I hear the stuff too loud behind me, I'm like, nobody wants that. Like, the attention is there. You want to, and if you get rid of that, and I'm not saying there's not good sound now, but if you slow it down and put it in front of you, you disappear into it, just like you disappear into a book. But if you're reading a book and you hear crickets in the corner of the room, it's like, I'm living right there, you know? So I actually don't believe in it. I think there are gimmicks that are distracting and a moment, whereas there's thousands of years of storytelling of escaping into something that's escapable into, versus like not being like thinking you might get hit by a wave right now and, you know, in this chair. And so it's like, so I am very skeptical about a lot of those things, but for that reason, I continue to want to make film, but the forefront of filmmaking that I'm interested in is what you put on the screen. Because when you think about what books are, it's like books are still a little bit more sophisticated than cinema, and they shouldn't be. Like, you can tell such sophisticated life experiences in books, but it should not be so. And it's because we're not challenging ourselves enough of the detail that you're putting on the screen, you know? In true, authentic emotional experiences happening with the actors that you're working with, and in the details around them where you're understanding such a complex story like you do in the real world, where you meet somebody and you know so much about them without saying, I am a blah, blah, blah. Well, we've remained in the I am a blah, blah, blah for so long. So I'm like, wow, I want to make more and more emotionally powerful films and immersive films, but I'm mostly interested in how I make that so rich and so real that you're like, I don't know why. I feel like I could live there. You know, like, that's what I would love to do, is like keep pushing in that direction where you have no idea why you are experiencing it the way you are because you disappeared into that movie.
So who, raise your hand if you're a filmmaker, you're gonna make a movie. Okay, this is going to be
awesome.
This is going to be relevant. So for these folks, what are the kind of, like, in your mind, the non-negotiable things that filmmakers need to be cognizant of as they're entering into the process of making a movie? Like, what are the things, like, just the non-negotiables that you're like, don't make this movie unless you know this or unless you're prepared for that?
First of all, I would say the first non-negotiable is what it is to really be a director. It is not the unquestioned leader. It does not mean you're the king of the castle. It is an absolutely brutally difficult job that one should only do because they passionately want to make that film, because it will disappoint you in every other way as a status. You know, it's like, it's not, and you see people be frustrated that you know, you shouldn't be challenged, or, well, you will be challenged. It doesn't matter who you are, and I've seen the greatest, most powerful directors be challenged by even the weather, or else if you're not challenged at all, their films get weird, you know? Like, it's not a great perspective. True. Oh yeah, they get too long, and like, it's strange, you know? Out of tension comes great art. You know, and you always want to escape tension, but that's not what it is, just like true love. It's like, there's no true love without quite a bit of fear, you know? It's like, you can't have one without the other. And so many of the people that I know who wanted to be directors couldn't find the version of directing that was comfortable for them, and decided not to be directors, and good for them. That's a much more sane life. Mm-hmm. But it won't ever be any different. And so going into it, like, knowing there's no there, right? It will never get to be a peaceful place. Yeah. It is incredibly difficult, stressful, hard job. So that's number one. And then number two, I think, like, you know, at least, you know, here's Steve Perry told me. Steve Perry told me, if you do something for you and you fail, you still won because you're doing it for yourself. But if you do something for them, and you if you do it for you and you succeed, then you succeed both times. If you do it for them and you succeed, you still succeed because you succeeded. If you do it for them and you fail, you lost twice over. And if you do it for them and you succeed, either way, if you do it and it's not for you, then I told that so badly.
I'm so with you.
Then you lose 2 times over because it wasn't for you. But if you do it for you, then you win 2 times over, whether you succeed or you fail. So
do it for you.
Do it for you because you believe in the movie, and whether you succeed or you fail, at least it was something you believed in. Whereas if you find yourself making something you never believed in, like, who cares? You succeed at something you never believed in? Like, how hollow is that? And so I think that that's like, make stuff that you think could be great. You know, make stuff that you want to make, and then no matter what happens, you're like, well, I tried. You know, versus like going in knowing it's not going to work out.
Yeah, I something that I share sometimes when I'm like reading a script or whatever, and I'll say like my agent will give it to me and I'll read it, and then I'll just be like, would you drive to the theater to see that movie? Yeah, and exactly. If the answer isn't yes,
yeah, exactly,
something, I don't know if we should be signing up for this.
And it's weird. There are so many of those projects where you're like, who loved this? They come to me as a director sometimes, and I'm like, now you want me to love it? Nobody's ever loved this. Like, this is a fucking mess, you know? Like, and you want to believe that a great director is going to change things for you somewhere down the road. Like, but good luck finding that director. I don't know. So anyway, yeah, it's like, that's what I mean. It's like, at least be on some ride worth one's life. It's an art form, you know? Like, somebody should be trying to do something.
Absolutely. So this is going to be the kind of last question. I just want to say, like, you know, whether or not you'd admit it or you know, you're a pioneer. You're absolutely a pioneer. And I guess what I want to ask is, like, in your headspace right now, it must feel crazy. I mean, do you mind sharing the story that you said to me about the picking up?
Sure.
And what does that mean for you?
Somebody else said it to me, and I thought it was funny, where the story is about like a general marching across a no man's land sort of field, and they drop the flag, and then one of the soldiers picks up the flag, and that's when the photographer snaps their photograph, and they're like, and suddenly that person's like, I'm the one holding the flag? Like, I feel like that as a woman filmmaker, because I grew up watching so many great female filmmakers, that it was a shock to me that I was the one that got to have this opportunity to do this, and I'm so appreciative. But yeah, I mean, I like have so much respect for so many people that came before me and are all around me. As much as I'm super honored to have this, you know, a chance to be in the dialogue in this way.
Yeah, and so within that dialogue, what's the this is a hard question. Like, what's the message? What's the thing that that you want to impart to this next generation of filmmakers? You know,
here's the thing I am talking about being a woman, but I'm also not, because beyond the issue of being a woman is like, if animated people can tell universal stories about turtles, like, and you can be that turtle, everybody can tell a universal story about any kind of character. And so that is the thing that I think is most important, is that there are so many different life experiences, and each of those life experiences often boil down to having common denominators, but telling that only in one small sliver of the world that sliver of the world is fine, but it's so strange not to include this whole other part of the world. And so I think it's just like anything that opens people's eyes to the fact that universal is universal. You know, all kinds of people can tell these stories and do all kinds of things. That's the part that I never set out to do. But watching it be revelatory enough that people have to write about the fact that a female character could make that much money is like, oh, so clearly people thought they couldn't. If you're writing about it this much, it means that is obviously something that needed to be very much conquered. And obviously I was aware of all of that going into it. It's not like I didn't know. But I always completely felt confident that it was not true, you know? And so that's, I think, the part of the conversation that I'm loving, watching the world really radically shift in that direction as we speak.
Well, thank you for just being
Thank you.
Incredible.
Thank you all for staying and sitting here. Thank you,
and our
guys.
fearless leader. You are our fearless leader.
Thank you.